could I have picked a worse background or a worse time to film my first booktube video? Because my voice isn't normally this deep. I am sick. I have the worst cold I've ever had in my life. It feels like the flu, but it's not the flu because I don't have a fever. The answer is yes, I could have picked a worse background because right next to me are bowls for my soup and sparkling water cans. So I just finished Milkman by Anna Burns. For those of you that don't know this book, it was the winner of the 2018 Man Booker Prize, and my nails match the cover. That wasn't intentional. But I thought I'd film a little review of this, only because from what I've seen, it's gotten such mixed reviews among, I guess, casual readers, because oh boy, it took me 2 weeks to finish this. It is a 348 page novel, which normally it does not take me that long to get through a book that length. Maybe a week at most, depending on like what else I have going on in my schedule. Oh God, maybe this took me more like 2.5 weeks. But when I show you a picture of the inside pages, like you'll understand why. Like, it is incredibly fucking dense. Like these paragraphs and that go on for pages and sentences that go on for paragraphs, and I think that's what divides a lot of people about this novel. So I should probably tell you what it's about. I am great at BookTube. So this is about an unnamed 18-year-old girl living in what is assumed to be Belfast in Northern Ireland in what is kind of assumed to be the 70s. Everyone is unnamed and everything is unnamed. So the city they live in does not have a name. The setting is never actually like stated. Everything is referred to as the over-the-border country or the over-the-water country. The main character refers to herself as middle sister, the guy she's with as maybe boyfriend, her family as first brother-in-law, third sister, wee sisters. Nobody has a name, including the milkman, who is a older paramilitary in her town who starts pursuing her, and rumors start swirling that she and the milkman are having an affair. That's not really the point of the book. It's one of those like stream of consciousness type novels that there really isn't much of a plot. Like when I was reading it, at first I wanted to know like what was happening with the milkman, like how the rumor started, why he was interested in her, what was kind of going on with the whole thing. But as I read, I just kind of got absorbed in middle sister's world, and her everyday experiences as a young woman against the backdrop of conflict. And I think that's kind of the point of this book. The point isn't finding out like what's up with the milkman. It's very much about narrating someone's life when violence is normalized. So before I read this, I watched Dairy Girls on Netflix, and I think the concepts are kind of similar, even though they're executed wildly differently, because I think Dairy Girls is hilarious. It's the best fucking show I've seen on Netflix. If you haven't watched it, you need to. And this is funny. There are lines where I like definitely like laughed out loud, and like that doesn't happen very often when I'm reading something, but I wouldn't call this a comedy in any sense of the word. But it's similar to Dairy Girls, not just because of the subject of the troubles, but just showing everyday life of young women in a city torn apart by conflict. I think it does a really excellent job doing that. especially reading it as a young woman. I'm 22. I'm not 18, but it's we're kind of like grouped together in that age group, and so much of what Middle Sister deals with is relatable, even if you aren't living in a city under constant surveillance. The way that violence is normalized in this book also gives it a very particular voice. Things just kind of happen, and they kind of accept that there are going to be murders, there are going to be killings, there are going to be bombings, and the characters just kind of deal with them. It is 100% normal for them, for example, to not go to the hospital because of the hospital's association with a particular group, and going to the hospital makes you an informer and puts a target on your back. So when people are critically ill or injured, it's a big deal for them to not go to the hospital when you're the one reading it. But for them, it's very normal, and it's interesting to see how like the community comes together during this kind of stuff. I kind of knew what voice it was gonna have when on page 8, when she talks about her maybe boyfriend. Burns writes, "This is my almost 1 year so far maybe boyfriend, whom I met up with on Tuesday nights, now and again on a Thursday night, most Friday nights into Saturday, then all Saturday nights into Sunday. Sometimes this seems steady dating, other times not at all dating. A few over his way saw us as a proper couple. Most, though, saw us as one of those non-couple couples, the type who might meet regularly but who couldn't be designated for a proper pairing for all that. I would have liked to have been a proper pairing, to have been officially dating, and said so at one point to maybe boyfriend, but he said no, that wasn't true, that I must have forgotten so he'd remind me. He said that once we tried, with him being my steady boy, me being his steady girl, with us meeting and arranging and seemingly moving, as did proper couples, towards some future end. He said I went peculiar. He said he also went peculiar, but that never had seen me with so much fear in me before. Vaguely as he spoke, I remembered something of what he was recounting. Another part of me, though, was thinking, is he making this up? He said he'd suggested, for the sake of whatever it was we did have, that we split up as steady girl and steady boy, which, in his opinion, had just been me anyway attempting that, talking about feelings, which, given my freak out when we did, given to, I spoke of feelings even less than he spoke of feelings. I mustn't have believed in any of that all along. Instead, he put forward that we go back to the maybe territory of not knowing whether or not we were dating. So we did, and he said I calmed down and that he calmed down as well." That paragraph goes from here to here. And I think if you're familiar with Irish novels or writing, or Irish speech in general, because I'll be honest, I don't think I've read many Irish authors writing about Ireland. Milkman might be my first. But if you're familiar with kind of that Irish storytelling style of speech, the narration style makes a lot of sense. And what I found particularly funny about that passage is not only the narration style and how so Irish it felt, at least Irish from the perspective of an American, but just the description of her relationship with maybe boyfriend, and the fact that she calls him maybe boyfriend at all, because I think a lot of us have had that kind of relationship where you're not official, you're not really a couple, but you date and you act like a couple. I've been in a relationship like that before. I called him my not boyfriend. So I thought that was hilariously like relatable and so indicative of the voice and the tone in this novel. I think the whole book is just very analytical about a society in conflict, a society under constant surveillance, how a community comes together or tears itself apart in those kinds of situations, particularly with gossip, and how much gossip and what other people say about you matters in this little town. And I think it does a great job kind of breaking that down through the voice of middle sister. In addition to that, her experiences as a young woman are sadly relatable. It talks about street harassment and stalking and sexual harassment, in the same way that it talks about violence, it's a very casual thing. It's just an accepted part of this society. There are bits about what Middle Sister calls the issues women, who are feminists in the area trying to work against the politics of this town torn apart by the Troubles. And that's really interesting to read about. The sexism and violence and all of that coming together as just like everyday life for Middle Sister really, I think, makes it hit home, because when you're reading it, it doesn't seem normal, and then when you think about it, it's like all these are normal experience. It's speaking strictly in terms of like everyday sexism. Like, I'm not from a town torn apart by the Troubles, though due to the fact that like Northern Ireland is nameless in this book, except for the strikingly Irish voice, it could really lend itself to any kind of conflict, which I think is one of its strengths, is that anybody could pick this up and think it to be about any kind of Troubles style conflict, because even though the Troubles are technically over, that doesn't mean that we don't see these kind of issues in the international sphere anymore. So I think for that reason, this novel will kind of remain timeless. I kind of lost my train of thought. I don't know. I liked it. Out of 10 stars, I'd probably give it like a 9. But on Goodreads, I did give it a 5, just because I thought the style and voice was just so unique. I've never read a book like this before. Even though it was hard to get through, there were points where I felt like I was just trudging through it, trying to finish. And that kind of was at the halfway point for me. I thought it was worth it. I thought getting to the end of the book and the end of the story was worth reading all of that narration. Have I read any other Man Booker nominees for 2018? No. Do I think this deserved it? Probably. Alright, so that was my first fucking booktube video. Let's see if this ever actually goes up on the internet. I don't know, man. If it does, maybe subscribe and I'll do more of these. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that gave you some insight into the book and it wasn't just me fucking rambling. But hey, I guess that's what editing is for. Bye.